Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your weekly update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today's guests are Jenny Bilfield, President and CEO of Washington Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., Kelly Tweeddale, Executive Director of the San Francisco Ballet, and James Johnson, Chief Executive Officer of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. Thank you for joining us, panel, and a reminder to our webinar guests that you can ask questions through the Q&A and chat functions at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to cover those topics during the show or afterwards. So we have never, ever experienced something like this. Could you talk about, Jenny, what you are encountering in Washington and how you're dealing with this coronavirus situation where it's just impossible to gather people together and have this arts performance experience that we are also accustomed to and that we all love?
Absolutely. No, thank you. And hello to everyone. We really appreciate this forum. I have to say, obviously this has been an extraordinarily challenging time, and it's different for every organization. Washington Performing Arts does not own or operate its own venue, and we don't have a collective bargaining agreement. We're a multi-arts presenter with a heavy focus on all genres of music, and we use venues all over the city. But we also have programs in 100 public schools. We have 2 gospel choirs. We have a thriving Mars Arts DC local focus. So at first, we had to unwind half of our season of all of these different events, thousands of transactions, and to really prioritize communicating with our patrons at a really continuous and impactful and transparent level. At the same time, we created a new configuration of staff to begin to mine the different digital content that we could offer, because the connection to the patron and support for the artists have been paramount at every turn. We did provide honoraria for the independent artists whose concerts we had to cancel. So we wanted to be sure that we were honoring our covenants with our patrons and our artists and our partners. The team created formats for digital content. Right before this, I do have to add that just as all the mass gathering numbers were beginning to close down, we were on the threshold of a gala with 600 people at the National Building Museum, with films done, many different paddle raises, auction, and
all those costs, to bid and support. But no revenue, right?
Well, we had sold the tables and the packages ahead of time. With 72 hours, we pivoted and created an all-digital virtual gala that was on site at a smaller location, the Salamander Resort in Middleburg, and we transferred everything that we could there. So we had a virtual gala, we raised money, there was live bidding. We actually came very close to achieving our revenue goals. Many of the costs went away. We were able to contribute the food to a local food kitchen and the flowers otherwise. But we gained very quickly the confidence that we could begin to look at what we do in a digital realm. So as we exist in this new form, we really are emphasizing our core mission, and we're thinking about what we're doing from a position of abundance rather than scarcity. And by that I mean that we know that there will be a lot of things that do not come back right away. It will be a very long time before the economy recovers, before people are comfortable going back into the venue, and there's data and survey feedback that supports that. So instead of lamenting that we won't be together because it is unimaginable, we're trying to figure out ways where we can be together and share unique experiences that our artists are creating with our audience. That's become our focus.
When you look at how artists are sharing their experience, you, Kelly, have a different situation. Your artists, your dancers at San Francisco Ballet, Helgi Thomasson, who is a phenomenal choreographer. How do you create art when so much of this is about touching and presence and rehearsing together? How does that function?
Yeah, so the San Francisco Ballet, just to put it in perspective, we were the first major organization in our city and in the country to have our venue closed. It closed on March 7th. We opened a program on March 6th and closed on March 6th. And we're a $52 million company, 7 collective bargaining units. And we had been in the conversation about social networks and social media and how do we use it and how all the intellectual property rights. And then this happened. And I will say it has transformed how we think about creation. First and foremost, just to give the perspective, is that we just threw all of the rules out the window. I went to our unions and said, look, we're in a situation where public safety and our just essence of who we are is at peril. And they said, as long as you pay artists, you could use the digital space however you want. So we have been really experimenting of what that means of using the digital space, from people creating. We were the first major urban place to shelter at home. We were sheltered at home and have been and continue to be since March 17th. So we have enabled content. People are creating in their small spaces or outdoor spaces. We are putting them together in a collective way and keeping in the artistic element. But as we think about how do we bring, actually it's not about rehearsing first. For us, it's first bringing the dancers back to the studios. And we have a professional ballet school as well that we have taught all over the world. Our students come from everywhere. So we had to return them home, and they actually are, we have 80 Zoom classes a week that are still happening.
80 Zoom classes.
Yeah, 80 classes that are done via Zoom. We do company class twice a week for our company, but anybody can dial in. They're publicly available. And so company class is taught in Zoom, and we have hundreds of people who take class. But bringing them back to the studios, we're aligning ourselves with Olympic athletes the same way as they're trying to figure out how do they come back to train, because a dancer's career is their body, and they lose their physique within a week of not being active. If you can't jump, if you can't run, if you can't partner, etc., you lose your skill base. So we worked with public health, and we have a wellness center. And so we are envisioning that possibly as early as late June, we would be able to bring people back in studios. We will put them together in cohorts. So 6 to 10 dancers can take class together. It's the same cohort every single time. And we'll spread them through the studios. They'll be socially distanced, and at least get the training component. Once we master that, and the reason for cohorts is really to, if we had an outbreak or somebody tests positive, we only take out a portion of our artists at the same, and we can continue everybody else to work. We have also thought about how do we bring the staff back. We were fortunate that there were planning. We have all of our systems that are cloud-based. So we have not missed a step. We have kept everybody working. We have not furloughed staff. We have not furloughed dancers or artists. And one of the other things that isn't about bringing artists back, but day 3 after being in this situation, we launched our critical relief fund, and it was to support our workforce and our artists and keep creative. And that was absolutely, has been a lifeline. It's been crowdsourced. We have learned so much about putting cause related in this crisis. So I don't know, it feels like we are throwing everything up in the air and reinventing.
And James, you are encountering a similar set of circumstances in that although you are not physically training, the training is really about how do you play together as a symphony orchestra? How do you ensure that people have that sort of ephemeral, nonverbal communication that happens in the greatest of performances? How are you encountering this in Indianapolis?
Well, Mark, thanks for inviting me to participate in this discussion, and hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during this time. It's really a challenge. To be a virtual orchestra is a 21st century construct put on a 19th or 18th century model. And I will say that our musicians have been incredibly inventive about how they make music together virtually. And so the musicians themselves have created a number of really interesting attempts at making music virtually. But we know that going forward, the challenge is going to be, how do you gather musicians safely on the same stage? And I don't know that that's I'm interested in Kelly's idea in terms of small cohorts of dancers working together. It's probably more challenging for us when you think about needing 60, 70, or 80 musicians to be in one spot at one time. I think it's frankly, it's the same challenge that sports leagues are having in terms of playing sports at this point in time, is how do you maintain that close distance and do it safely as musicians. So we have not, yeah.
We've also been selling the idea of live music, right? As opposed to recorded music, right? This idea of coming together and feeling the reverberation in the hall and sitting with people. And now we find ourselves, we have to think about this sort of hybrid model of, yes, the excitement of live, but we're intermediated by these electronic means.
That's right, but we have the advantage as being a musical organization in that our musicians can play solo or in small groups. And I'm thinking, there's nothing but video content out there in just bushels and baskets on the internet. How can we connect with our community? And by that, I mean our local Indianapolis community, our patrons, the donors, the subscribers. Can we connect with them on a really smaller scale, very personally? Can our musicians do a small concert for a small number of people, that as it would be in a salon or something of that nature? I think that's where we can be really effective, and we can be local during this time, as opposed to just creating another one of those Brady Bunch videos with 100 musicians, which are wonderful and valiant efforts. And I really applaud all the institutions and orchestras doing those kinds of things. And we've done some as well. But how can we connect directly at this time with those who are really key to the success of our institutions?
It seems that we're all being forced by circumstance to reinvent. Do you all think that this is going to lead to a sustained change in your organizations and the relationship of the audience with your performers?
I absolutely think so. One of the things that we have been doing, to James's thought, is actually doing small chats with our audience members, with our major donors and our artists. And we also are connecting them with the creation mode. So putting them behind the scenes and showing them how we are doing these digital performances. We have a 49 member orchestra as well. And so the orchestra members are now collaborating with dancers. So we're doing improvs where certain musicians are connecting with dancers, they're creating, we're post-production we just did something called a chain letter, where actually the whole orchestra played their parts digitally. Our conductor actually took them and merged them into something that sounds like an orchestra, and then our dancers danced to that. It was put together, and that chain letter is now going to different ballet companies. So New York City just added to the chain, and we're putting that together. We're putting it back to our audiences. We're doing watching parties, listening parties. We actually put free content every Friday. We are releasing new content. And it really has allowed us to connect with the public and the artist in a way they've never been able to connect before. Q&A sessions before and after. So I think some of this will come back with us when we go back to our more traditional way of working.
And how are you all marketing, Jenny? How are you connecting with your audiences in that same vein?
Well, it's interesting because we work with so many artists who visit or who are local, but the gospel choirs are really our sole resident ensemble. And we've, in the past, many years, developed some unique projects with artists and brought them into our series, not only with a straight ahead performance, but often with unusual repertoire or formats and touch points with local artists and our education program. So the fact that we can bring, or the possibility of bringing an artist to have a really rich sort of digital residency is also doing what Kelly was saying, which is bringing the patrons and the artists together in ways where actually technology democratizes that process and makes even more possible in terms of the through lines and connections. So one of the challenges to our field, I think, is to differentiate what we're doing and how we're serving artists, and frankly, providing more of a compelling platform for artists because they can control a great deal more of their own presentation to the public, and we can be their best partners in that. And that's what I think some of this online fluidity has enabled, and we see a huge amount of content, but focusing it through the values and missions of our organization is the great opportunity ahead.
We've all talked through the years about the importance of connecting audiences to these arts and these arts institutions when they're not buying tickets, right? You're sort of preparing that relationship. And now we're actually forced to do that. And also we're grappling with how to monetize that relationship so that it's self-sustaining.
Yeah, one thing I'll just mention that we did early on, and it was a guess on our part, but it is paying off to be a good retention strategy of our earned revenue audience, is that we gave people, asked them to either donate back their tickets, which we all know how to do, or keep their tickets on account in a solidarity that we would be back, or ask for a refund. And it's been really interesting. 34% donated back, 61% kept it on account, and a very low, less than 5% asked for a refund. So that allowed us on a cash flow basis to keep a lot of cash in the door. And secondarily is we know that people are ready to come back. Now we'll have to deal financially when they use that credit, but when we haven't announced our 21 season yet, but when we do, it won't be as big of a draw into their pocketbook because 60% of our season was canceled. So they have a large amount that they can put forward and still commit. So we're looking at how we backfill, that on account from a cash point of view, but it has retained the deepening that we've done to our existing audience has been surprisingly poignant. Let me put it that way.
And James, have you found the same kind of approach effective in Indianapolis?
We have, and it's remarkable when I look at the figures from across the country. I'm seeing the same thing, and just about everywhere. It's really heartening, and our audiences have responded the same way. Very few are asking for outright refunds. Most of them are investing in our future by putting those concerts on account for future times. It's really incredibly heartening. I will say, I mean, it's going to be a challenge for us as an institution because yes, cash flow, that's going to be very challenging for us. And I can tell you that subscriptions for next season, we did announce our season some months ago. It's very slow. It's certainly it's one of my biggest concerns in terms of cash flow overall. We've seen that contributions are generally continuing at a good pace, certainly not at a surprisingly robust pace, but they're good, they're strong. But ticket sales are going to be the real challenge coming back because people are not necessarily wanting to make a fresh commitment today. They'll roll those tickets over into next season, but they're not necessarily buying new subscriptions in big numbers.
And the impetus to try and monetize this sort of digital content is so important as well. So we may be a little bit too early in the arc, but I think that James is making a really important point that we've got to be very careful about our costs, because if we're not careful about our costs and they run away, our livelihood is threatened, and our future, the future of these art institutions, are threatened. Jenny, you were going to say something. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, please go on.
No, it's quite all right.
No, I absolutely acknowledging that we hadn't announced our season, so we're still really recalibrating and shrinking what we do just to match the concern about the economy and resources. One thing I have to say as we speak about the loyalty of our patrons is that so many of our foundations and government supporters that had previously provided project support have gotten ahead of this by creating either independent funds and emergency funds, but most importantly, recognizing that general operating support is what institutions need now, and that we need a little bit less pressure on the reporting and on the matching requirements, because this is a cash issue and it's also a project issue. And the trust that is built between the patron, whether it's foundation or individual, is really paramount now. So whatever we're conveying and the work that we're doing, I'm hoping will provide continued reassurance to our funders that the general operating support and the pragmatism of our organizations is going to create good stewardship for those dollars as they're available. But that was a very significant pivot as well from the philanthropic community. I want to recognize that.
Let's talk about that pivot from the philanthropic community, from the artists, from your audiences, from your patrons. The arts are so important. You know, we're talking about life and death in a pandemic, but the arts are so important of keeping our spirits up and giving us the energy to keep going. And creation isn't suspended during the worst of times. Could you talk about the meaning of art in your community, James? And then let's talk about it in a broader sense, not just in terms of the particular art forms that we represent, but why is art and why is support of the arts so worthy of our investment in these times? James?
Thanks, Mark. And I think I've been astounded by the number of visitors to our site to listen to archived concerts. We've been broadcasting at our normal concert times. We've been sharing out streams of previous archive content, and I tell you, people are hungry, and but they want to go local. They're very interested in what's happening in their town, and that's so much of the important message that we as arts organizations have to consider, is that our funders, our patrons, our donors want us to be collaborative, even during this period of time. And so we're reaching out to our fellow institutions, and I've had more conversations with museum directors, ballet companies.
Bilfield, right?
Absolutely. We speak on at least a weekly basis. And I think that this collaborative effort is going to result in really something wonderful now. I think we'll figure out ways to collaborate virtually, but then coming back, I think that that's going to make our communities so much stronger. Our communities are so much, they take pride because of the arts and what the arts can bring to the community. And they miss us greatly during this time, and they want to see us working together going forward.
And Indianapolis is a great town for that, right? You have both the local and the national purview there. And you have institutions where, if you look at the boards, there's so many sort of cross-fertilized points in a place like Indianapolis, but that's also true in a small town like Washington, D.C., right? The heart of the nation as its capital, or San Francisco, just an amazing arts place. Kelly, what are you experiencing in terms of collaborations and how people view the arts?
Yeah, there's two concepts that I'll throw out there that we've been thinking a lot in San Francisco since we sheltered first. Locally with our arts leaders, we've been meeting every week via phone call, and really in an advocacy way, because we are in the home of Nancy Pelosi. We have been really active about making sure the nonprofit sector and the arts sector is included in any bill that comes out having to do with stimulus or the CARES Act. So it has brought us together in a way we haven't. But we've talked about two concepts. One in San Francisco, first out, last to return. So we have to prepare that because the performing arts and mass gathering will be in our plan in our city is, phase 4, the very last phase. So how do we support each other through workforce sharing and really starting to get a system together where we know what the needs of all other arts organizations are and how can we assist. So we've kind of been a divide and conquer. The other concept is this: we've gone to change our thinking from a global marketplace to hyper-local. Because what we are experiencing, I also have a weekly call of all my colleagues across the nation in ballet. And so what we're experiencing in our regions are very different. And we are also seeing our audiences being very hyper-local. And so this global community, although we're all connected, we are going to find ourselves having to invest in a very hyper-local where people may not travel, people may not feel comfortable doing what they used to do. Cities may transform just business-wise, how they do business. So we're trying to understand what that hyper-local, it is an advantage to a live arts organization to serve its community, but it changes our thinking.
Right. And also your investment in terms of where you invest your funds, but also your attention. And you have a requirement to ensure that the artists' ecosystem, the platform for artists, are
Right.
preserved within your ecosystem.
Yeah, and we don't exist without our artists.
And the same thing in Washington, right, Jenny?
Absolutely. Through our Mars Arts DC program, we focus on local artists, and I think our goal is to get artists back to work.
The optimism that you all are displaying, and also the sense of empowerment. You're not frozen, right?
No.
You have some of the biggest challenges that anyone has, because our traditional approach to experience this art has been a group approach. We have to social distance. We can no longer hold on to those old models. And you're basically taking that as a challenge, and you and your teams and your artists are meeting that challenge. It's not easy, but wow, I mean, just so much admiration for all of you, and support for all of you coming from all of us who experience and are grateful for your art. Thank you so much, Jenny Bilfield of the Washington Performing Arts, James Johnson of Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and Kelly Tweeddale of the San Francisco Ballet. Thank you so much for your optimism, for your performances, and please extend our thanks to your artists and your teams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.